Hi, my name is Lisa Montgomery, writer at herheartforgod.com. Can only men be overseers, elders, pastors in the church? That's what I'm going to look at today, specifically the text of 1 Timothy 3. So I think this text, even more than 1 Timothy 2:12, was what most convinced me early on when I had held to a more complementarian view. This text is what convinced me that only men could be overseers or pastors or elders in the church. So let's look at this text and take a closer look and see if that's really what Paul was trying to say. So let's read. Here is a trustworthy saying: whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not given to drunkenness, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him, and he must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. If anyone does not know how to manage his own family, how can he take care of God's church? He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited and fall under the same judgment as the devil. He must also have a good reputation with outsiders, so that he will not fall into disgrace and into the devil's trap. In the same way, deacons are to be worthy of respect, sincere, not indulging in much wine, and not pursuing dishonest gain. They must keep hold of the deep truths of the faith with a clear conscience. They must first be tested, and then, if there is nothing against them, let them serve as deacons. In the same way, the women are to be worthy of respect, not malicious talkers, but temperate and trustworthy in everything. A deacon must be faithful to his wife and must manage his children and his household well. Those who have served well gain an excellent standing and great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus. Those who have served well gain an excellent standing and great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus. 1 Timothy 3, 1-13. And so a lot of people argue from this text that Paul is only allowing men to be overseers. And I've got to be honest, this text seems to make it very, very clear, especially from all the male pronouns that we see in the text. It's everywhere. He or him. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. He must do so in a manner worthy of full respect. He must not be a recent convert, or he may become conceited. It appears very often, and so we hear this, and obviously we think that Paul is only talking about men. But I was so shocked when I found out that all these male pronouns aren't in the Greek text. They've been introduced into our translations without us even knowing or realizing, and these translations have really impacted our interpretation of this text. But we really need to go back to the Greek text and see why Paul isn't excluding women from being overseers or elders or pastors in this passage. You see, Paul seems to even be going out of his way to make sure not to insert any indication that he's only talking about men. He could have used the male pronoun aftos for he, but he didn't. He could have said, if any man desires to be an overseer, they desire a noble thing. But he didn't. Or he could have said an overseer is to be a man above reproach, but he didn't. By Paul's language, he was being very inclusive of both men and women. And as we go down further in the text, Paul started to talk about deacons. He gave many of the same qualifications for a deacon as he did for an overseer, but he specifies that there are women. So he said, in the same way, women are to be worthy of full respect. And so women were deacons in the church. And there are two objections that I think people bring to this text when they see that women could be deacons. One way that people have dealt with this is to say that Paul was actually talking about a deacon's wife. However, we don't see the specification. There's no their wives in the text. It does use the same word for woman as for wife, ginekas. It's the same word, but the context doesn't seem to be indicating that he's talking about the wives of a deacon. It would be kind of odd to insert right in the middle of a text on how deacons are to compose themselves and talk about women in general or their wives. I don't think it fits well with the context, and grammatically speaking, there's no reason to think that that's what Paul was doing. A second objection would be to say that, well, a deacon is really just a servant. And actually, I kind of agree. The word deacon is the same word. The word deacon is the same word that means to serve or be a servant. So yes, a deacon is someone who serves the church. But I mean, we can't just minimize it in that way. If we look at today, how we apply this passage, we have deacons in the church who serve the church in a specific way, depending on the church. I think it varies a lot. But if that's how Paul understood it, is that if that's what Paul is talking about, then women can do those roles. But if we're just talking about a servant, we need to also understand that Paul uses this term to describe a lot of people's ministries, including himself. And so we can't just diminish it because there's a woman. Oh, well, she's just a servant. I don't think that fits well with the context. Paul is giving a very high standard for how a deacon should behave. And so this seems like to be a specific role that people are having in the church. So women could be deacons. If they can't be overseers, they can at least be deacons. And then I'd like to look at two other objections that people have from this text to argue that women can't be overseers. The first one is to say that Paul is explicit that an overseer needs to be a man faithful to his wife. So it has to be a man, because you can't be faithful to your wife if you don't have a wife. You're not a man. I think that oversimplifies the issue. The Greek phrase used is mias gynekes andra. So the man of one woman, or the man of one wife. That's the literal translation. But this same phrasing is used later on to talk about deacons, saying that a deacon must be faithful to his wife. Mias gynekes andra. So it's the same phrasing to talk about an overseer and a deacon. But we know women can be deacon. If you don't believe that this passage says that women can be deacon, well, there is one woman that was identified as a deacon, Phoebe. In Romans 16, at the beginning of Romans 16, Phoebe is a deacon of the church in Cancria, deacon to a specific church. And so this phrasing, faithful to his wife, it doesn't exclude women because it's used to describe deacons, but a woman could be a deacon. And so we need to think what this phrase means is probably more it's excluding people who aren't faithful to their wives, either because they are in an adulterous relationship or maybe a polygamous relationship would be excluded. I think that's highly likely. And we also must understand that this isn't excluding people who are unmarried, because that wouldn't make much sense. Paul wasn't married. Timothy, as far as I know, Timothy wasn't married, and that's who the letter is addressed to. So this phrasing, faithful to his wife, it doesn't exclude unmarried people, and it doesn't exclude women. Another objection to women overseers from this text is that Paul says that an overseer must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. And so obviously, if you come from the perspective that a man is the head of his house and it's the man who rules in the home and manages his home, then of course you're gonna think, well, yeah, Paul is saying it has to be a man to be managing his home well. But Paul actually explicitly tells women to manage their homes well in the same letter in 1 Timothy 5. In 1 Timothy 5, Paul told women to be managers of their own home. So this doesn't exclude women either, nor does saying that his children must be in obedience to him exclude women either, because from Ephesians 6 we know that children are to obey their parents, their father and mother. And from the Old Testament, the Ten Commandments, we know that children are called to honor their father and mother, both children. So this phrasing doesn't exclude women either. And so from this text in 1 Timothy 3, I don't see any specific reason to think that Paul was excluding women from being overseers. There's still the issue of why Paul addressed women deacons but didn't address women overseers. But perhaps that there was a temporary reason in Ephesus that he didn't want the woman leading that church at that moment, because there was a lot of false doctrines going around and women might have been the main perpetrators of these myths going around. But at the same time, this in and of itself doesn't exclude women. I think Paul was very intentional in not letting his text appear to be excluding women from being overseers, because he used very inclusive language. He didn't use any male pronouns. He didn't talk about men specifically. He said that if anyone desires to be an overseer, they desire a noble thing. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Check out my blog, herheartforgod.com, for more articles, and subscribe to my channel if you want to get alerted when I come out with new videos. Thank you. Bye.